Glass is a writer and independent researcher focused on the history of the Rocky Mountain and Northern Plains regions of the American West. His work has appeared in Annals of Wyoming, True West Magazine, and WyoHistory.org. His book, Reshaw, The Life and Times of John Baptist Richard, was named Best Nonfiction Book by the Wyoming State Historical Society, and his follow-up book, Empire, won the 2021 Will Rogers Medallion Award for Biography. Jefferson lives in Kanab, Utah, with his wife, Debbie. His new story, The Hunt for Reed Hunter, is featured in the upcoming anthology Hard Country, edited by Revis Wortham and published by Ronan Weatherford Publishing. Welcome to West of the Page, Jefferson. So, tell us about your story.
Oh, I started here a few years ago writing this murder mystery series about a sheriff in Las Vegas in the 1930s. And you always start on something like this when you have a series. You kind of want to carry some background, so a reader who picks up book number 4 doesn't get totally lost if they haven't read 1, 2, and 3. And I found out fairly early on that I'd kind of missed out a little bit on book number 1 of some of the background that I thought was kind of important about this guy and what helped shape his character. So this short story that I've written for the anthology is a prequel to the murder mystery series. And it's about an event that happened to this man when he was a young deputy, about 15 years before the rest of the series takes place. So it's an interesting story. It's called The Hunt for Reed Hunter. And Connor Armenta, the sheriff, who's a deputy sheriff at this point in time, was a very outdoors person. He grew up on a sheep ranch in the area just west of Las Vegas. And as the family difficulties it was, he had become very important to his family as far as being the bread and butter winner. His father got seriously injured in an accident early when Connor was 14. And so he had gone to work in a mine nearby there. And before this mine shut down, he had kind of incidentally ran into this young man named Reed Hunter, who was 12 at that time. And he was an orphan, and he was digging through garbage cans, and Con kind of rescued him when he got off work that day. And it was cold wintertime, and he gave him a jacket and bought him a bowl of stew and sent him on his way kind of thing. Well, then lo and behold, a couple of years later, this kid's in Las Vegas, and he has accidentally got his writing partner for this ranch that he works for, and he thinks that he killed him. And so Con had sent after, find this kid. He just realized, talking to the rancher, that he knew him from before, that this was a kid that he had met 2 years before. And it makes for a really interesting story, I think. And it puts some background into the character of the key character in the books later, and brings this young man in that makes it kind of an opening for me. When he's a couple years older, he might be back in another episode.
You talked about how he is, this is a prequel to your murder mysteries. So when you started writing Reed Hunter, was he inspired by any historical figure, any real figure?
A little bit. He's kind of inspired slightly by a character that was in Open Range. And I can't remember the kid's name. That was a young kid that Robert Duvall and Kevin Costner had rescued off the streets of some little town in Texas years before. And it's kind of based on that kind of a character. He's willing to do anything, hard work, or do anything to make a living, and kind of brought up in a pretty rough lifestyle, and trying to become civilized, I suppose would be a good way to put it. But
Oh, I remember that movie. That was a good movie. And I remember the kid too. So that's a really fun connection. How much of the setting and details in The Hunt for Reed Hunter, like ranch life, moonshiners, or remote trails, come from your own imagination, or for even your book series, did you do a bunch of research? Where does the setting fit in?
I'm a researcher. I'm a researcher more than a writer. I love the research, and I did a lot of research. I have maps of Las Vegas in 1927, maps of Clark County in 1927, and then you take modern topographic maps that are all available online, kind of things, and you overlay. You can see where this road used to be and where it isn't anymore, and I put a lot of geography in my stories, and not 100%, but mostly. I know a lot of writers fictionalize. Craig Johnson is a great guy, and he's where he's from is where I'm from, and was a great mentor for me in a lot of things when we were writing. But he takes and he takes Buffalo, Wyoming as Durant in his books, and he takes Cheyenne Indian Reservation, which is 150 miles away, and he just puts it right next door. And he changes names and things to make it all fit. But people that know the area can really relate to it, and that's why they have Longmire Days in Buffalo, Wyoming every year. Because thousands of people come from all over the United States, in fact, all over the world, for that event, and you can place that. Well, I do the actual name of the place if I can, and I try to, not 100%, but pretty close. If I say there's a spring here, and when Khan's chasing down an outlaw somewhere or whatever, there's a spring there, and he says he rode 25 miles a day, and he went from, in that process, he gained 3,000 feet in elevation. That's true. I mean, and I literally mapped this day out on a topographic map, and taken the old maps and overlaid to make sure that things were in the right place. And I used the names off the old maps as much as possible if they've made change names. And in book one of the series, Han's 14 years old, and this friend of his father's gave him a Winchester rifle because his father's rifle got broken in the accident that his father had. So here's a 14-year-old kid out herding the family's sheep, and he's the only one keeping the family alive. And going, well, what did a 30-30 Winchester cost in 1904? Yeah, and it's cool. You go to Las Vegas newspapers, you find them on sale at the hardware store for $99.99. And I'm going, that's pretty amazing that you could say, oh my gosh, this cost $100. That was like 4 months' wages for an adult, let alone a kid comprehending that kind of money. And here's this old family friend gives him this rifle, and he tells Khan, he says, I don't know. I says, I'll never be able to repay you for this. And he says, it's not to be paid for. It's a gift. And he says, this thing cost $100. And he goes, it's not new, and he just shines it on, and it's so important to the young Connor Armenta, and this guy becomes a huge mentor of his, because his father is crippled now for life, and still gets around, but not very well. Can't be running the ranch by himself. It's how those kind of things. And I was writing book one, takes place in 1930, and I'm reading a lot of 1930 newspapers. And I stumbled across a deal where a young Indian had fallen off a train. He was probably riding the rails, fallen off the train and killed. And it was the newspapers in those days, they didn't hold back on gruesome at all. I mean, the descriptions are just blood curdling. And so in book two, I start off book two with that incident that the kid was murdered. And so it, I had all my sister says, oh, it's just so gruesome in that first chapter. And I go, oh, that's nothing compared to what it was in the newspapers, describing this body that'd been dragged down the tracks from the chain and stuff. So I backed off. I didn't do that in any more of my books. It did upset a few people, I think, and I don't want to lose readers because it's gory or whatever. I try to write in a in a style that it wouldn't bother you to have your 13, 14-year-old kid reading it. There's nothing too vulgar or that type of thing in it. So I can almost fit into the young adult category on occasion, kind of thing. So
that's incredible to be able to do that kind of research and to really incorporate into your stories. And as like a reader or like, just viewer of TV shows and movies, and I'm usually always one to like go fact check. So, it's just incredible when we have, writers to be able to do that and to incorporate that into their stories. And you talk a little bit about Connor Armenta, and we know that he's a thoughtful lawman and a tracker rather than that stereotypical gunfighter. What inspired that kind of Western protagonist? And I mean, I know that he's in this series already, but I mean, what do you have in store for him?
He is very adept at what he does, but he's very low key about it. And there's an incident in a later book where he has to face down a guy with a Thompson submachine gun, and he kills the guy with his 45 automatic against a Thompson submachine gun. Gets hit twice in the process, and his life's on the line. But it's not. It's one of those things that he becomes very well known for that. That he gunned down a man facing off a man with a machine gun, and one of his deputies and later says, "What are you talking about? You're not a good shot. You put two shots in this guy's chest from 30 feet away, and he's shooting at you with a machine gun, just bullets going everywhere. And he goes, I didn't even think. It was just automatic that this is what I had to do. There's no alternative, and that's the kind of guy that he is. He's never had a girlfriend in his life. He's 35 years old, 34 years old, never had a girlfriend in his life, and he falls in love with this secretary of this attorney. And that is playing in the background of the first four books. And they get married at the tail end of book number 4. And so it's he's very naive. He's like you. He would be so smart and so worldly and so knowledgeable on so many things, and he doesn't have a clue when he has a very obnoxious younger sister who's very outspoken, and this sister who's hard to get along with, and his loving mother are his two things that he really relates to women with. And so it's fun to create a character like that, and you can make him do whatever you want. You write the book.
This anthology is benefiting the U.S. Marshals. And so we just wanted to ask you, what does it mean to you personally to have your work included in a project that supports and honors the legacy of the U.S. Marshals?
I was just thrilled when I was asked to submitted a story for this series, and obviously a lot of other people were, because evidently readers we ended up with a whole bunch more stories than they thought they were going to have, and I'm very proud of that, and that I was accepted. And it's also a thrill to work with. Share the pages with a lot of people, some mentors, some heroes, some people that I've met, some that I haven't. But I'm very pleased to know personally 6 or 7 of the really top authors of these books, and it's been a real honor in my career. I didn't start writing till I was in my 40s. And I worked a day job, hard for a lot of years, and it's really important to me that these people that have degrees in journalism and really know what they're doing consider me a peer, and it's a real honor. I kind of Wyoming guys. I don't know CJ Box very well. I know Craig Johnson really well. I know Mike Deere really well, Mike Catherine, and they're it was kind of the joke when I moved down to Utah, southern Utah, a couple of years ago. Was there were too many good writers I was competing against in Wyoming. I had to find some fresh ground to expand by myself when I retired. Kanab is famous for Western movies. There were hundreds of Western movies filmed here, especially in the 1930s, 40s, and early 50s. And I write a newspaper column for our little local weekly paper. It comes out every other week on the history of Little Hollywood, because that has the nickname of that. And so every other week, a little article will come out on these things. Actors, stuntmen, sometimes directors, sometimes producers of monumental things that some of these movies had. Is the first 4 or 5 articles were all on firsts that happened in this little town of Kanab, Utah. It was dirt roads to get here, and they caught an interest because of the scenery and the landscape around here to really make some of these good. And first movie that was filmed here was a Tom Mix movie that was filmed, a silent film. It was filmed here, and the movies as they came along was the first talking movie that was filmed here, and the first talking movie that was filmed outdoors was filmed in Kanab, and because Kanab was such a great place. But if you stop and think about of what this was like, they had to figure out how to record the film on the edge, the voices and the sound on the edge of the film as it was going, and they had it knocked down. They really knew how to do it in a studio. But you get outside, that was a whole different thing. There's no acoustics. There was no place for the sound to bounce off the walls. It was really a huge accomplishment to succeed at that. And then there was other things like the first Technicolor movie was. I mean, there was just lots of those little things. And then 1939, along comes Ford with Stagecoach with John Wayne in it, and filmed in Monument Valley. And what was almost comical, if you sit and watch that movie and you know where these different places are, there was only like 15 minutes of that movie filmed in Monument Valley. They literally shot in Monument Valley. They shot in a week, and it was no dialogue to speak of. It was just outdoor scenes with the Monument Valley in the background, and you go. They spent a month in Kanab, and then they spent weeks in other places in California and that. So Kanab probably got maybe 25% of the film time in that movie, and which was a lot. But it's kind of funny to go through and watch these, and it amazes me. I've never really studied film at all, and to go. And I try to watch every one of these movies. You can find almost every one of these movies online from someplace, and you watch some of those early black and whites. Those early black and white cinematographers were astounding. They knew how to make, Johnson Canyon, you could see every crack in the rock right where it is today on some of those movies that were filmed almost 100 years ago. And you're going, these guys knew what it was about without color. And then you see one of those movies, it got colorized, And they go, "Yeah, no clue what color that cliff is." They'll have it, this tan cliff, and it's bright red if you go see it in real life. Yeah. But
Yeah.
in the studio, it was sitting there with a watercolor doing one frame at a time. Didn't know that.
So you mentioned that you didn't start writing until your 40s. So like what inspired you to start writing, and what did you do before you were an author?
Well, I was a truck driver for a number of years, and I was a diesel truck mechanic, maintenance manager, that type of thing for more years. But I was about 40. I had a medical issue that took them 2 years to figure out what was going on. I couldn't work, I couldn't drive. And at the time, I lived about 400 or 500 yards from Reshaw's Bridge, about the Reshaw Buck. And I just started researching this bridge, of where this bridge had been in the 1850s. And I started just, and in those days, I was didn't have internet.
Right.
This was you read a book that mentions this, and you look at the footnote and see where that information comes from, and you write a letter to Meineke Library at Yale and see if you can get page this through this of this journal that they have on file, and they write you back and charge you 10 cents a page. You says, "Oh, that's going to cost me $3," and you go, so you send $3 in postage, and some student sits there and photocopies those pages and sends them to you. And I literally spent 20 years researching and writing the book, and it was really quite a feat, and it came out beautifully. And I had a really good editor and a really good publisher on it, and they made sure that it was perfect when it hit the press. And consequently, I won a Spur Award from Western Writers of America on that book. I won an award from the Wyoming State Historical Society, and it really got a lot of people interested in me, and I was nobody. I had written articles for Annals of Wyoming, just little. Annals of Wyoming is very, very scholastic magazine, or especially in those years was even more so than now. Of they wanted documented every single source for every single word in the article that you wrote, and I was very good at doing that. And so my articles might not have been that good, but they were really well researched, and that helped me kind of get a little name recognition in the historic community. And I for having an associate's degree in forestry has really nothing to do with what I write about or what I do or what I did most of my life, because the timber industry just collapsed right when I was getting out of college, and I worked 6 months in it, airline management, and then there were no jobs because they weren't going to hire some kids straight out of college, and they have foresters that have been doing that work for 30 years getting laid off. So it was bad timing on my behalf. I met a guy several years later, and I was kind of complaining about that. And he was a nuclear physicist that graduated college 2 weeks before 3 Mile Island, and he said, "Do you want to talk about being 6 years of your life on the line, and it ended just as soon as you graduated?" There was nothing to do with nuclear energy that anybody. There was going to be no expansion. And right before that, when you got to started and all that, it was the new frontier. Everything was going to be relying on nuclear energy, and one incident killed that. And you're not doing this bad. I go, "Yeah, you're right. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this." It's interesting how our lives go from one place to another, and kind of because of my forestry background in a little bit, I went to work for a helicopter company in Oregon for a number of years. That they did a lot of spray herbicides on stuff in those days, but more so, a lot of strict and that kind of thing. And Mount St. Helens Blue, we had 80 helicopters working on that for months, trying to find people help. And it's that outdoor environment type thing, and I was familiar with it, and we did a lot of helicopter logging, and I understood how that worked and what were needed as far as I worked in parts primarily there. Uh, uh, I understood how critical things were for that industry and the kind of things we did. And as time moved on, I moved to Wyoming. I was one of those deals. I had a headhunter found me. I don't know, didn't know anybody was looking. But I went to work for a company in Wyoming as in aircraft parts, and they when I wasn't really looking for a job, this guy, the president of the company, called me. This guy told me that I need to talk to you. That's knew the guy well that had recommended me to him. It's when can you fly to Casper, Wyoming for an interview? Like 60 hours a week. I don't know when I'm going to have time to fly to Casper, Wyoming. He says, well, he says, when he says, you get weekends off, do you read out sometimes if I arrange this in advance? A couple weeks later, I flew to Casper on a Friday night and spent for all day Saturday and part of Sunday with them. And Sunday morning, he says, well, this guy's in his office, and he said, well, what's it going to cost to get you to move out here? And it was one thing. I grew up in Eastern Oregon, which is very similar climate to Wyoming, and I missed it. I was living in the rain belt, and I was tired of it. And I says, oh, I don't know, make me an offer I can't refuse. And he said, well, what are you making now? And I told him that he's just 3 times that much.
Wow.
When do you need me to start? And so that brought me to Wyoming. I lived there for 43 years. And the company I went to work for actually went out of business about 4 years later, but I loved it. And I loved the history. Growing up in Oregon, with the 4th grade, you do Oregon Trail history in school. And all the things they talked about, and it's Rock and Timothy Rock and all these places, they were all in Wyoming. And here I was. I lived right down the road from them, and I didn't do that well in high school in history class. I became quite an expert on it because I was so fascinated by it. And it's led me to one thing's led to another, and here I am. I had a high school girl, senior in high school in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, emailed me day before yesterday, wanting my opinion on things to do with the Johnson County War, because she was writing a paper on it, and she had read an article that I had written, and she wanted my insight of what I thought about this and what I thought about that. And I go, that's pretty cool, that this young girl who's fascinated with Wyoming history found me. I had a guy in Chicago, a professor in Chicago here about a year ago, similar type situation. So that sheriff in Douglas, Wyoming, that I wrote an article for True West magazine and years ago. So, well, I'm trying to research enough to write a book on it. So, well, good luck. I researched that guy for 2 years. I couldn't find enough to write about him. Fascinating guy, but there wasn't that much information. I shared a lot of information I had. It's fun to have that reputation with some people. Right now, I'm working on writing a children's book.
How are you?
About a border collie puppy that entered my life when I was driving truck, and it was telling my wife about it. So I've always had dogs, and the dog that I had most recently was Cocker Spaniel, and he was so smart, and he was a clown almost, but he'd go and I would just beat his heart and what he's thinking. It says, he's thinking about what what are you gonna do now? And she says you should write you could write children's books on just pick any animal and be them. And so Oreo the cow dog is going to be a book, and I'm friends with actually a retired stuntman. Lives with I can look at his house right out the window right here. That also was a artist for Disney Studios back in the cartoon days, and he's written a few children's books, and I'm going to hit him up to illustrate it when I get it done, because I just like his style, and it'll be beautiful. And so I'm looking forward to that. It's kind of a new venture. I have book 5 murder mystery series about halfway done, and it's just sitting there. I got to finish it up too. But it's there's always more than you got time to do, no matter what you're doing. So that's kind of where I'm at. But I kind of got sidetracked. I do that a lot. Got down a funny trail. As far as the credential of these anthologies, supporting the Survivors Fund of for the U.S. Marshals is just overwhelming for me. I wanted to write a book one time about the history of the sheriffs of Wyoming, and I never quite. There's some really Joe LaForce and some of these guys are just really famous lawmen in Wyoming, and literally I started to do it, and then I ended up. There were so many really great sheriffs that nobody knew about. That's kind of like John Richard in the Reshaw book. Nobody ever heard of him, but he was in the middle of huge historic events, and that many wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for him. And so I like to get the guys that nobody knows too much about that really did important things. But I was starting to do some research on that, so maybe in the future put together a book of Wyoming sheriffs. And so many of them were killed in the line of duty. So many of them were very short careers. And I was a ride captain for Patriot Guard Riders, which is a motorcycle organization that does funeral escorts for veterans and spawners. And it's really moving to get heavily involved in that horrible side of this. That there are those beauty and those that those families that they're just gone. When I was a Patriot Guard Riders, we started a thing that we got a lot of killed in actions in Afghanistan and Kuwait, and that was going on in those years, and to be honoring those soldiers and seeing their wife and their kids there going through this. And those little kids are never going to know who their dad was. I mean, 10 years down the road, and you're 4 years old, but 10 years down the road, you're going to barely remember what he looked like other than pictures. And so we started doing this thing of we'd buy high quality teddy bears and put them in black leather chaps and black vests and a Patriot Guard rider's patch on the vest, and giving them to these kids, and telling them that you may not remember him, but he was a hero. We know that he was a hero. All these guys on these motorcycles all know that your dad was a hero. We want you to remember it. And it was a hard thing to do, but a good thing to do. And I had more pastors and over the years say that was the key. That was the most important thing of the service, is at the cemetery after everybody's getting ready to leave. You come up and give these prayers, and it's just about the organization, anything for what we did, and everybody just hey, we we need to have 3 or 4 beers made up in case we have another funeral here, and everybody's 20 guys pitch in $20 a piece, you don't need that much, kind of thing. It was a very heartfelt thing. And fun. It was an honor to do, and I did. I led a group for a deputy sheriff killed in action down in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, and the Patriot Guard Riders Organization in Nebraska is all around Omaha, Lincoln, and really very, very little on the western end of the state, and they asked me to do it. He was so loved and so honored by that community. And Scottsbluff's not a tiny town. It's not a big city, but his funeral was held 15 miles from the cemetery. And I was leading the funeral procession, and you're talking country roads, you're talking cornfields and hayfields, and you're going down these paved roads, but literally every driveway, whether it was into a hayfield or into somebody's house, there was an emergency vehicle parked there, stopping traffic until we went by. And you do that, and and there's one every quarter to half mile for 15 miles. And if you aren't in tears by the time you get to the other end, how honored that man was. And I could barely ride by the time I got to I was just totally emotionally broke down. That it was. I get that same feeling for doing this anthology. It's for those families of these great people, and they're the ones that have got to benefit from this. And most anybody will tell you, I don't make any money writing, so it didn't matter that I was doing it for free. Yeah, that's all. It's
our audience is so excited to finally read these stories, and I know that we at Ron and Weatherford are so appreciative of all the authors who are helping us and just contributing their talents and their time to this anthology. So